I'm really looking forward to that. So let me share my screen and we can jump in directly. Cool. So let me know if you can see my screen with a big hello and a waving hand in the middle. Cool, that works. So hello again. Before we start, and two of you already did it, I would be super interested where you're actually watching from. So say hi in the Zoom chat. I think it's in the bottom of your Zoom window where you can open the chat, and just let the others know where you're watching from and who you are quickly. I saw someone from Stuttgart and Zurich already, but from Hamburg, nice, hi. I lived in Hamburg for a while, that's cool. From Düsseldorf, we have quite a lot of Germans, that's cool. Amos, yes, hi. Cool, nice to see you all. So super quick about me, because it's the topic itself should not be about me. So I'm closing this one. Yep, there we go. So I'm Alex. I'm a German, currently living in Barcelona in Spain, and working for the mobile bank N26 that you can see on the right side. So we are a mobile-only bank where you can get an account on your smartphone only or online on the web. We don't have any chains where you can go to in person, but that's kind of the challenge we're facing with, hey, how do you translate a bank account to your smartphone only? The examples and the learnings you will see today are mainly from the work I'm doing at N26 in Barcelona. Before that, and since we have some Germans in the room, I can drop it. I worked before at XING in Hamburg for a couple of years. That's the German version, I would say, for LinkedIn, to explain it to everyone. And currently I'm senior PM in the memberships team there. So we take care of different tiers or different memberships that we have. So for example, the very black card here is a premium card. The transparent one is a free card. And we're the team who need to make sure that the value proposition of our premium tier meets requirements of our users. That's so much in a nutshell about myself. The topic, and it has been said before, today is how you can set up your team for continuous product discovery. And I want to give some real world examples. There are some pictures in there from our work in the last year. And I hope you can take something for your daily work or you find it useful and try some of the stuff out yourself. But before we go directly into that, let's take one step back and ask a question like, what is discovery actually when it comes to software development? And if we take discovery, the first thing that comes to mind is like, you always need to have one part where you decide what you're in the end going to build in a so-called delivery. So there's always two sides. You need to find out first what you're going to build and why you want to build that. And then the second part, how to deliver it to our users. And every time you see this little Zoom icon, it's kind of you're taking part in the discussion that's hopefully going on Zoom at the moment. And the first question I do have is like, how often do you discover? Is it, or you do activities that you would consider as running discovery? Is it on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis? I hope nobody says never, because that would be rather sad, but let the others in the Zoom call know how many times you discover and if you're happy with that. So we said there is always a discovery that needs to happen and there is always a delivery that comes after. And over the years, the delivery part of those two got way more mature. So for example, with the development teams, you have a daily stand-up, you're working in an agile way, you have continuous integration, you do user story mapping, like you name it. There are so many different things that probably all of us have heard of and are doing on a weekly basis because they just feel quite natural now. Like almost all developer teams do a daily stand-up to make the delivery processes better. On the other side, the whole topic of discovery, where you might have heard most of the stuff like design thinking, ideation, running user interviews, lean startup, and all the buzzwords. Like, not every team is doing that on a constant basis. As long as they're doing it, it's fine, but they're not doing it on a constant basis. So there's not like a daily stand-up, something that is happening, at least in the teams that I had insight to, that is, we do experimentation every day or experimentation every week. So why are people able to do that? Like running discovery for a longer time period without doing it on a continuous basis, and then deliver something after that discovery. Because most of the teams currently, they think that the future is predictable. And by saying that, this is what leads us to a very traditional approach to product management. You do a time box discovery for a couple of weeks. You fill the backlog, you know exactly what you're going to deliver because you did that discovery, and then you have several weeks of backlog where you just work through. And in most cases, and probably there are a lot of people in the call who know that, they're coming up with a product roadmap. This looks something like this, where you exactly know when something is going to be shipped, and you communicate that to stakeholders, and then you try to deliver on time. But the problem is the future is not predictable. Like, just because you have a product roadmap, you might not know how a user's behavior is changing in like 3 weeks if you launch it. It's not the launch of something or the launch of a feature that is automatically working perfectly. And at least in my career, I never managed to get it right from the very beginning, because, as I said, the future is not predictable. And because the future is not predictable, we need to find other ways on how we do run discovery and delivery at the same time, to always discover only enough to do the next steps and deliver the next steps, and then do a reassurance if we're still on the right track, or if we're still building towards a user's expectation to the product, for example. This is not something new, because already in 2012, the whole concept of continuous discovery has been inspired by, and funny enough, the book is called the same way, Marty Keegan, who a lot of people refer to as the godfather of product, when he wrote in his famous blog about continuous discovery, like running delivery and discovery, not in sequence, but in rather a loop, or in kind of a way that it's ran at the same time, which we then in the end called the modern approach to product management. You do continuous discovery, always discover new items, and you fill the backlog items, not completely filling the backlog, but only as much as you need to make the next learning and to make the next steps. Cool. You might think that totally makes sense. Product discovery in a continuous way, rather than started with product management. Like, everybody's saying it, but where do you start in the end? And oh, sorry, the picture is a bit blurry. But in the end, if you search on Google for product discovery, like, there are a million different ways on how you can do it. There are a lot of frameworks, a lot of methods, and like, you don't know where to start. So I would like to hear from you on Zoom what your favorite framework, or if you know a framework that you like, or a method for product discovery. I would like to share that you share that with the people in the Zoom call. So feel free to use the chat and just put a name there, or describe it real quick and why you like it, to have the discussion going on there as well. So back in the days, what I did to better understand where to start with product discovery and also continuous product discovery, I actually picked the first picture on that Google image search, and that brought me to opportunity solution trees. And opportunity solution trees, they are a way to externalize your thinking. So in the bottom left corner, you see Teresa Torres, who is the inventor of those trees. and we're using it now for a lot of different things. So the blue sticky here on the top is the goal you want to reach. The green ones are potential opportunities that you discovered, and the yellow one are experiments that you need to run to prove if that potential opportunity, the green ones, is true or not. So you see that it's a way of where you can manage to link the goal you're probably getting from stakeholders or from your boss. You can link that all the way to the experiments that you're currently running. And I will tell a bit more about opportunity solution trees later on, but this gave us a nice framework in the beginning to start running discovery, because it's not a process where you have something to do in sequence, because you could start here, you can then go here. You always need to start with the thing that is most important at the moment, and with a tree that is easier than with a sequence. So we did a lot of experimentation, and I really do like experiments, but what about strategy? Because as I said, you could start everywhere, but in the end, you also don't know where to start and why you should start at that point. So during the same time when I had that challenge, I was reading another book, which was called Escaping the Build Trap by Melissa Perry. Not sure if everybody knows it yet, but if you're a product manager, you should better read this. It's really, really good. But why? So in the build trap, Escaping the Build Trap, it's Melissa Perry, the person on the right. Not sure why the pictures are a bit pixelated. Sorry about that. But Melissa on the right, she kind of took a method from a book that is called Toyota Kata. She transformed that into how product management could be run and called it Product Kata. Toyota Kata is from Mike Rother, a former employee of Toyota, on how to improve the processes of their development teams. And she kind of translated that same principle or that same method into a very product management like Product Kata. The next question that I would like you to answer on Zoom is, have you ever heard of the Product Kata? If yes, please share your experience. I'm reading it later because that would be a bit weird if I go now to chat, but I'm super interested in your experience on the Product Kata. If you have ever used it, if you have read about it, feel free to share that in the chat. So let's have a deeper look into the Product Kata and how it helps us to structure our continuous product discovery. In a nutshell, the Product Kata, and into each of the sections in more detail in a second, but how it looks in a nutshell is you have 4 different steps. 3 of those steps are the strategy and the analysis of that strategy. And the 4th step is then about the experimentation. And all of this could give us a method or a framework on how we could run continuous product discovery ongoing. And the main message from this talk, or the main thing I would like to share with you, is how we use that Product Kata on our daily basis, or on a daily basis at N26 with those 4 steps. And for this, I would like to zoom out a bit, because now it's going a bit in that direction. So if we're looking at the Product Kata, again, 1 to 4, these are the steps. The first step that you probably do on a quarterly or yearly basis, and the other 3 steps that are more on a daily to weekly basis. And I would like to share some learnings with each of those steps. And hopefully you find something useful that you can use on your daily work as well. So let's start with the first one, the quarterly or yearly company goals that you're planning, or the product KPIs that you're monitoring, the vision and future state that you're getting from the company. So looking at, again, the Product Kata, this is all about the big pictures and the metrics. So for example, at N26, and that's a picture from a couple of years back, but it's still happening. So even with Corona and everybody needs to work from home, we're having at least 3 sessions a week where our executive board or people from the company, within the company, share their current results, share their visions, share their OKR results, so that it's transparent for everyone and that we're all kind of running in the same direction. And this is super important, because if not everybody understands where the company wants to go, you might end up with a lot of different directions. So these meetings, mostly the Monday commitment, where everybody looks at numbers and like, okay, this is how user growth has happened, this is how the monetization has happened. That's really important to get everybody on board. And that's why this is also the first step in our product kata in that sense. And if you do it on an ongoing basis, you kind of develop a feeling for what is a good metric, what is the bad metric, where does the company wants to go, and that kind of gives you boundaries for the later state of your discovery. So this is happening, as I said, on a quarterly, yearly basis, that you at least to understand that and need to set that new goals. But you can, and we show that it works, you can have a weekly session with the whole company to kind of remind everyone what's going on. The next step, which is the second step, is the first one of the stuff that should happen on a daily or weekly basis. And the first one is everything about our current products in front of users. Here I called it what are users doing now, but in the end, it's not only what are the users doing now, but what are the user needs that they currently have? What is the behavioral data we see from our product? But also like what are competitors doing? Like what is the current situation we're in and how do we serve that? And if we're looking at some of the examples here where we set together with, in this case, the team in Barcelona, where a user researcher is giving us insight into a research study that they did about our users, and we included a lot of different people from different disciplines. So there are PMs there, there are designers there, there are tech people there, researchers there, to kind of share the knowledge we gained on a broader scale. It should not always just be the product marketing or the product manager person knowing about these things, but everybody who is in the end building products for those users. And that was before Corona time, but as a proof, it still kind of works when you work from home. So this example is a picture from is a scene from a Google Meet, where we sit together every Thursday, exactly at this time at the moment. So I'm skipping this week, but usually on Thursday at 4 to 6, we're sitting together with our data analyst, which is the person in the middle right here, with product people, user research people, product marketing, designer, developers, to look at how do our current products perform, or we can also ask questions to data analytics. So they have a week time to come up with some dashboards, to come up with some research and present what we have learned in that week. And by doing that on a weekly basis, you in the end learn something about your users and you learn something about your product ongoing. And it kind of automatically translates into how you define the next tickets, because you don't need to start from scratch. So if there is a new topic that you need to look at, you're more likely to already have kind of an idea where to look at or where to start if you are doing this on an ongoing basis. Another thing that we're doing quite often in that sense is we do have a lot of customer support agents. Since I said in the beginning, we don't have any bank chains where people can really go to. We have a couple of hundred customer support agents. They via phone, via chat, via email, help our users to, if they have any problems, if they need support. So they are the people that are the closest to our users, because they're calling or writing with them at least 8 hours a day. So what we're doing quite a lot is coming up with surveys, but not only to our users, but also to our customer support experts. And it's super interesting what they have to say. Like, for example, when we did a or we started a new topic and we had no idea where to start. We sent 2 questions to customer support and we got back 100 answers on where the problems are, what are the biggest problems our users currently face. You can do a couple of other things as well, like really doing ground research with users and user surveys. You can run interviews, or some B2B companies where it might be easier, they do have a beta user pool. Just getting feedback and getting input from users directly on a weekly basis. That's the main important thing here. So taking all these learnings and taking all this information we're getting about users, or we are sharing the videos. So even if you're not part of the initial research or you haven't spoken to that user in person, you can at least, mainly the developers, or if the research has been done in another team, you can get the content of the user research. Like if a persona is described, this could be super interesting to everyone in the company. Like, what is the user problem we're facing? What are the jobs to be done that we're addressing? So making everything transparent and accessible to everyone who is interested. Another thing that we are trying on a constant basis is keeping a living documentation. And I intentionally say living because the documentation you might just create and nobody looks at it ever. But a living documentation, for example, in Figma, the tool I'm using at the moment, or Miro, or even on Confluence, you can keep screenshots of the features, screenshots of the products that are currently in front of users. So when you come up with a question, you already know directly, okay, this is the flow they're currently seeing. This might be a problem if we're changing X, Y, Z, but also to make that connection to data analytics. Like if you understand how the flow really works and looks like, you can probably better understand why the performance dropped or why the performance increased, for example. So bringing everything together and connecting the dots with dashboards, but also with real screens. Another thing I would like to share, which was super interesting for us, is driver trees, and it's explained in the book Impact Mapping. If you never heard of it, it's a really good book. It's like a couple of pages, but with a lot of visuals, and they explain on how you can create one of these driver trees. That's a real world example. That's why I had to blur out a couple of stuff. But what you're doing in the end is the black box here is the goal that you want to reach. And then you kind of translate, or you translate it in a way, in a tree again. What are the levers that could help you to reach that goal? So for example, in this very much example, we said we want to increase the numbers of cards or physical cards, MasterCards that we're sending to users. And then the gray boxes are number of MasterCards and price of MasterCards. And then you kind of build that tree and you can identify potential opportunities to change some parts of it. And you have an idea on how the change of these, or the tweaking of specific parts of that tree could result into increasing a metric. These work quite well together with the opportunity solution trees that we saw before, because these are the ones that show a relation between different features, a relation between different aspects of a feature. So if you want to learn more about that, feel free to check out that book. That's super cool. And then I haven't touched the whole user interviewing, user research topic. There are a lot of great books out there, like, for example, the 3 on the bottom left here, Interviewing Users, Talking to Humans, the MOM test. Feel free to read them. Like, they're all really good books. What I wanted to share with you in here is that what I learned, or what was super interesting for me to see, is that, for example, Ichna, in that case, was one of my former developers, and I took her to some user interviews we were doing, and like after that interviewing, she completely changed her perception on building products. She was not only looking into using fancy algorithms or fancy building fancy code, but rather she was like, hey, what do users think about that? How do we explain that from the user interviews? And I think that's a really good learning that you can take, that you want to bring everyone involved in building the product in the end to hear from users firsthand on how they're experiencing it. So I shared a couple of tools, methods about understanding what the users out there are doing and translating it into something a team can work with. But again, I would like to hear your thoughts, or would like to see your thoughts in the Zoom chat on how do you do this in your current company, or do you have any tools, methods that you have heard of, never used, or just whatever comes to mind, and share it with the community. So after we understood what is currently out there, ongoing with our users, what are they doing, why are they doing it, we can look at the next step, because we do have the goal from number 1, so the red one. So that's the goal we want to reach. Now we understood kind of the playground that we're in. And the number 3, the blue box, is then what's the next little goal? What's the next step we need to do, or we need to learn to increase the goal, or increase the metrics to get us closer to the goal? And you in the end, and sorry again, it's a bit blurry, I don't know why, you in the end ask a couple of questions, like, again, what is the goal? Does everybody know what's the goal is, and where are we now in relation to that goal? What is the biggest problem or obstacle standing in the way of us reaching that goal? How do I try to solve that problem, and what do I expect to happen next? And that's the hypothesizing part. And if we're then going into a bit more detail on how we did that, for us, we usually, if it's a beginning of a bigger project, we run a workshop or a kickoff where we do, for example, customer journey mapping. So bringing everything that we already know or might not know yet onto the table and share what we know, what we need to learn, and how far we are away from that goal that we got set, or that we are setting ourselves in the first place. And that usually works in 2 ways. So the first day, you really try to understand the problem space. And then on the second day, you try to understand the opportunity space, but you're not mixing those two. You really need to understand first what's the problem you're trying to solve, and then what's the potential opportunities. And again, this works really good when you have everybody in the room. So there were people from Berlin, there were people from Barcelona, but it also works when you work from home. So with people, we did that with real, oh, I just get a connection that my internet. Do you still hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes,
cool.
now it's better.
Sorry, if it's keeping being a bad connection, let me know. Then I'll try to change something. So yeah, everything that worked with real people in a meeting room also works online. You need to be way more structured, and you need to have an agenda and goals set. And we did that workshop with 35 people, but it works. Like, you just need to do a bit more preparation probably in the beginning. So you do the big kickoffs in the beginning, but then again, now working from home, you can still do kind of small workshops defining the next steps with a bunch of people, then playing it back into the bigger group. And a really good book here, for example, is the Workshop or Playbook, where you get some ideas on how you could run workshops. There might be other books out there as well, but this is one I have read. So doing bigger kickoffs in the beginning, trying to bring everybody on the same page. And then while you're developing, still keeping kind of the vibe and doing those workshops, including people from different disciplines. If you have the luxury to have a big team and you have different disciplines, make use of them. So try to create the next steps in ways of in hypotheses or in how might we questions. So you're formulating, for example, how might we solve challenge XYZ? How might we make it easier for users to understand the value of our premium product? Not telling the team what to do, but rather giving them those challenges. One thing we experimented here with was quite nice, because not everyone in this room was involved in the meetings before. So we had to bring everyone up to speed in a very short time. And I mentioned it here, Amazon memos. So handing out, for example, what Sergio is reading here, handing out a paper in the beginning, all learnings that you have made so far. They need to they need to read it by themselves for 5 minutes without talking, without discussing, and then you start the meeting. And it really changes the meeting culture completely. Like everybody knows exactly what you're talking about. You set the scope of the meeting and you can start producing and creating new value. So after we have defined how might we questions and we have defined our next goal, we go really into the experimentation part. So quickly going back to this one, just to remind you, we went through the first 3 one. We defined strategy, we analyzed what's currently going on. Now we're going into the experimentation phase itself. And there we go, number 4. So in the user research or product experiments, it's really like this build, measure, learn. So you always kind of come up with a how might we question or with an experiment that you want to run. And we're again seeing here the opportunity solution trees from earlier. And this is a great way of structuring your experimentation, because each of these yellow ones are, or the green ones are the next steps that we just defined, or potential opportunities. How might we solve that? And the yellow ones are then experiments that you're defining and you're running. And you can either do this with opportunity solution trees, or we also used an experimentation backlog to kind of show everyone, okay, where do we currently stand? Why do we do that? To kind of have a roadmap in that sense, but a very flexible one based on the outcome of the experiments. You can diverge in your direction. And then it's really just user research. For example, you can run design sprints, which we tried out in the beginning of a bigger topic. And that's actually a picture from my work before at XING in Hamburg. But you can run design sprints for 5 days to go a bit deeper into a specific problem if you think you haven't completely understood it yet. There's a great book about that as well. But at the moment, we needed something a bit more lightweight. 5 days is quite a long time to come to an MVP or to test something with users. So what we started in 26, we called it Feed Forward. It's a session where we invite real users to our office, which is a bit hard at the moment. So at the moment it's paused, but we did that until COVID started, inviting real users into the office and running user interviews with them. And every team at N26 could sign up, and you then have 15 minutes with each user and you're just circulating around. You have probably 8 users on an evening, and you do like quick testing, UI testing, jobs to be done testing, just to understand what the users are doing and how they probably perceive something that you're currently building. And that doesn't need to be written in code. That could be paper prototypes. That could be anything that you need to learn something new. And then that was probably everything before building one line of code. So we discovered a lot, or we learned a lot before even writing one line of code. And the more you do this, the cheaper your learning is going to be, because writing code, and probably most of you know, or all of you know, writing code can be hard to, it's expensive, it takes a while. So everything that can be done without writing code is much better. So we're now at the point where we would then say, okay, this is something we really want to test with users. We really want to put into production at that point. You can still do it in a beta release, an internal release, roll it out as an A/B experiment. So for example, we're rolling, I would say 90% of stuff we're rolling out is going to be an A/B experiment just to see how users change their behavior. You can run factor tests if the feature is not really done yet, but you want to see if people are interested, and you still can run usability tests, and there are some great books out there. So the question I would have here is like, what's your favorite experimentation method and what types of question can it answer? Because not every method can answer all questions, but I would like you to share with the people in the Zoom call what's your favorite and what you're using it for. So taking whole continuous product discovery process looks quite circular and still super easy. You always go from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, and sometimes you do the loop to 1, sometimes to 2. But in the end, if we're honest, and because we said discovery can be messy, it looks a bit more something like this. So you have sometimes phases where you need to reassure with your company that you're still kind of aligned, but then it's a lot of experimentation, the yellow ones, for example. And that brings us to the point I want to make in that presentation is that in all 4 of those phases, and we saw that at the pictures, you need to talk with other people. You need to talk and you need to understand what their feelings are, what their desires are. If it's users, if it's your customer support agents, if it's the team you're working with, but you as a PM, you're the one who need to facilitate that talking and that communication and need to make sure that the people talk to each other. And by doing this on a weekly basis, you can set up your team to build things that really matter and make a difference and increase value, not only for the company, but also for users. And then hopefully, if we're using this more often and if we're using this in a continuous way, we can not only have a continuous delivery, which we saw in the beginning, but having a continuous discovery as well, where it's not unusual that you have on a Thursday morning a user interviews get. So wrapping up the talk, my learnings from a couple of years working that way now is that transparent alignment is key. So make sure that everything that you learn is always accessible to every discipline, to every person in the company. And it's not only within product marketing or product management or the people who did the research. What I learned is also that it really helps to visualize as much as possible. Like you saw a lot of screenshots, a lot of trees, and just externalize your thinking and make it visible. Or visual. It really helps with communication, in my opinion. Don't trust a single experiment is the next one. If you're running research over a longer time period, you're kind of developing also your product sense, and you're able to make judgment, not only based on one experiment or one A/B test, but rather various sources. The highest point here is probably talk to users on a regular basis. Like, even if you don't have access to them directly, talk to customer support or shadow customer support if that's possible, but let voices of users affect you hopefully at least every week and guide you in the right direction. And then if that's possible, and I know it's not possible for everyone, but make the full team, developers, like everyone, talk to users and see how they behave when using your product. I have one more thing before we jump into hopefully a discussion, and that's something personal. With a couple of friends, I started a while ago PM Library, which is a resource for books that we believe could be interesting for product people, for product marketing, for developers, for designers, that we think that those people need to read. But it's not only us who think that. As you can see in the middle here, we also always feature people from the industry. So if you're reading a lot, let me know. I'm more than happy to write an article about you, about your favorite books, and share it with the community. We have roughly 10,000 people now in that community. And if you're interested in books or interested in content to learn, feel free to either go to the bmlibrary.com/books. You will land on the archive of all our books. We have a Medium blog if you want to read a bit more about a specific book, or we're currently building our very first own product, and I'm super excited about that. So if you want to be updated as soon as it's ready, we're currently in an alpha phase, but as soon as it's in beta, feel free to join the waiting list on the bmlibrary.com/waiting list. And this also brings me to my very last question before we have a discussion, is like, what's your favorite product management, design, leadership, or book, and why? To add that to the call. So that was my talk, and now I'm really looking forward to getting questions and have a discussion with all of you.
Awesome. Thank you, Alex. That was actually really good. There are quite a number of questions on the chat. You know, and there are certain times during your talk when you are posing questions, so I'm not quite sure if you want to go through those first before we open it up to everyone else.
I'm currently reading, but there is a question. Hi, Alex. Many thanks for who is leading this process? Thomas, I think you're the one. If you're the product manager or if you're head of product, I think you're the one leading that process. Not alone. Like, there are people that have an interest in you leading that process. So for example, digital analytics on our side is running that specific session on a Thursday. User research is running another session during the week. But I believe that product managers should be the ones kind of facilitating that. And we do in our group have 5 product managers. So we're kind of sharing that responsibility and do it on a segment or on a group level, however you call your teams of multiple, or your bigger teams of multiple smaller teams. But in my opinion, it's product managers that need to facilitate that. Maybe you see it differently, or now that's a discussion part.
No, I think I have the same opinion, but I could also imagine that the UX guys are in charge of this process. In my company, it's the main part is to guarantee this alignment so that everyone has the same mindset in doing this continuous discovery work. Mm-hmm. And maybe that's another question for you. So do you have also, are you struggling with this, or do you don't have this kind of trouble in your company, because everyone is trained well and has the same mindset, and nobody is discussing how you have to discover things?
That's a good question, and for sure I'm probably the most vocal person when it comes to running proper discovery before you jump to solutions. And there are others in the company that need to work in a different way, because as a bank we're in a regulated environment. So for some teams there is just not enough room for, you can go wherever you want. It's like, this is the rule, you need to follow it, that's why you need to build it that way. So I think we have kind of the whole spectrum. But the team I'm working in, I think we're quite free in the direction we're going. It still needs to fit to the bigger picture of the company, but we're getting this, the freedom to run this discovery. And yes, there is a lot of struggle always kind of between leadership and expectations, and like what's coming from the grassroots, like the people really working with the teams. And it was a long way over the 1.5 years I'm there yet. But at least the former CPO that we had that just left, she was an advocate for running product discovery, and that really helps. Like, she was shielding a lot towards the rest of the company, but I think that's also what you meant. Like, you need to have someone in a very high position that supports that, and that makes that happen, like gives you the room. And you need to have a lot of people feeling comfortable with saying no, because there will be always requests from all over the company and stakeholders. They want just something to get done. And if you tell them, okay, yeah, we're not doing this right now because we want to open that space before and see what other options could be there. And because most of the time you get not problems, you get ideas, right? Like, but you don't know if that idea that you're currently getting actually solves the problem or solves a problem at all. So it's kind of a mindset that the company somehow needs to develop over time. We did our homework in that sense, and we probably were also not lucky because we really did the homework, but all the things that we did in a way that understanding the problem first, running discovery before just jumping to solutions and building something for a couple of months, it always had a really good outcome. It always had a really good result. So we kind of earned that trust, or got the trust that they give us problems now rather than just tell us what to do. And yeah, I see that struggle, and I hear that a lot, and it takes time. Marty Kagan said a really good, or gave a really good answer to that at one point when he said, if the struggle is too big and the leadership just doesn't want to see that you need to run proper discovery before you do the delivery, then it's probably a company you don't want to work for. And if we all get to that point and we all get trained on running proper product discovery, but they don't let us, like at one point, that whole mindset needs to change of all companies, because otherwise you will end up with product people that worked like 20, 25 years ago. And that's not sustainable in these times, at least in my opinion. Cool. Any other topic or question? You're welcome. I don't see another like direct question in the chat. That's why I'm opening it up. Cool. Ivana, feel free.
Yeah, hello. Thanks. It was really nice to hear what is your experience so far. My question is actually what is a bit challenging for me. It's about the experimentation part. How do you have any tips how to choose, let's say, the right users that we want to make experiment with? Any tips on that? Because like for me and my UX team, yeah, we are always questioning that part, who we should invite. And
that's a really good question. I had a chat with a user researcher exactly about that topic. Like, how do you make segmentation? How do you get the right people that are able to answer the questions that you're having?
Yeah.
In the end, we came to the conclusion it's hard, and it's probably the biggest part to get the right people. I personally think it could be helpful to look at the user flow and try to understand at what point in the user flow you would be able to ask the user that question that you want to get answered via the interview, for example, and then try to see if you can somehow detect via data analytics or whatever, if you get to a user group that stops at that point or that goes beyond that point, and then kind of asking backwards of why did you do that or why didn't you do that. Another potential opportunity that we tried out, for example, when we wanted to better understand why users are not retaining in our premium product. Why do they cancel it? So we put something, we put a survey, or I think it was 1 or 2 questions inside of the app. So right after user clicked the cancel button to cancel the premium membership, we prompted the question or 4 questions, like what do users, why do they cancel? Like, what's the reason? What do they miss? Why are they not happy? Why are they not paying us another year? Like, just like getting a couple of answers from users in the right moment that showed us a lot of good learning that we could apply on building kind of features that help to address that topic before it occurs. And probably that's what I would do, like trying to understand where users are in the process or in the funnel, and then really trying to get those users that experience it firsthand.
Thank you, really helpful.
You're welcome.
Can I ask one additional question?
Sure.
Thank you. So it's again about the experiment, and you also said by yourself that it's like one experiment cannot say the truth, right? From your experience, what is the best set of, let's say, qualitative and quantitative types of methods that you used so far in order to that lead you closer to the truth? Do you have anything, or maybe in different cases, different methods are working, I guess?
Yeah, I wouldn't consider myself an expert, but I can share how I see the topic. It really comes down to what is the thing that you want to learn. Like, where are you currently in that discovery process? Is it something where you just want to find out if a certain UI works or UX works? Then you probably just only need to show it to 5 to 10 people. You will get most of the flaws or most of the bugs. There's, I think, even a method around that. I'm not sure how it's called, but 5 to 10 users should be enough to answer those questions. If you, for example, want to run an A/B test to test 2 different flows of the product, then you probably want to do this quantitative after you did the UI testing. Like, you need to really put it in front of users to let as much as possible users through that flow to get conclusive results, to see how it works. For a couple of experiments at the moment, which are going into the space of upgrading to premium and retaining people in premium, which is a very long-term experiment because our subscription period is 1 year. So users signs up for premium for 1 year. So things that we're building today, they might affect users not at the moment, but if they're at the end of their cycle in a year. So we're always looking at cohorts of users and see how they develop over time and see how the features that we're building today affect them. But especially for those, for example, the segmentation, because we said, okay, we trust in what we're building, and we with the product sense and with the things that we discovered over months, we know that this is going to work to some extent, but we still wanted to see how much it works better than not having this feature. So we said, okay, let's roll it out to 95% of users, but still holding that 5% hold back group to be able in like a year or in half a year, maybe it doesn't take that long, but in a couple of months to be able to still compare it. So your segmentation would be 95 who see the new feature compared to 5 who don't. But coming back to your question, like, I think it really, really depends on what you want to learn and how much people do you need to make that learning. And then it's a question beforehand, even where you say, is this something we can just find out when speaking to users, or is this something a user really needs to do or really needs to change their behavior, which is then mostly going into the quantitative space.
Okay, thank you.
What do others think? Like, it shouldn't be me just giving answers. Like, is there anyone in the call that made good experiences? Yeah, Vitalina?
I didn't make good experience, but I'm actually at the same point. So I just got a product, a loyalty program, which I need to create, and where I need now to find out what features should it include so that the repurchase rate increases. But I only know that the repurchase rate increases after 3 to 6 months. So this is exactly what I'm currently working on. So actually, I really like the part. Maybe you could say something about best practices, how you currently do it, because what I try to do is, of course, we have a combination of qualitative and quantitative, so that in the end, we don't have only one data point, but still it's very complicated to construct a behavior and to just ask people, would you retain after a year, because it's just opinion based. So this is currently also a struggle which I currently have.
Yeah. Yeah, what worked quite well for us is not like asking for what are the problems they're seeing, why they didn't stay in a premium membership, what are what are they missing from the current offering, and why do they don't go into another subscription period, for example, which in our case showed us clearly that, and that's probably a lot of products have the same kind of problem, that we're saying they don't see the value for the price. Like that was always the first answer, but then digging deeper into what they're actually experiencing and what their problems are, gave us a completely different perspective on what we need to do, what we need to develop to hopefully, and we will see that in a couple of months, retain more users. Not only taking that first answer as given, but probably there is like the 5 whys. I think there's an article about that, but asking more and asking deeper to then really get to the point why users don't retain. And it's probably in most of the cases, it's more than just this very first answer that you get. I see that we are, Nacho, you have something. Hi.
Yes, hi. I like the conversation around continuous discovery, taking time to ask all the right questions, even having design sprints. But I wonder how this can be done in a startup where you have very short timelines to get to a point of profitability. You are at the risk. You have a high risk of you're on the side of business where the risk of failure is high. Do you have any ideas, or does anyone on the call have any ideas around that?
I personally have to skip this one because so far I always worked in companies where they have reached product market fit already. So never had this problem, but currently being kind of in the same situation with starting something or building something on our own. So if someone in the call has a good answer, feel free to jump in. Doesn't look like. I'm sorry, but I wouldn't be able to give you an answer yet. Like maybe if we do that call in a year again, I can share some thoughts, but at the moment I'm probably not the best person giving those answers.
No problem.
Cool. I see that we reached an hour and that some people are already leaving. Maybe if you have time, just we can do one more question or one more topic. If not, I would hand over again to Amos.
Yeah, I think it looks like we've exhausted the questions. Okay, cool. Alex, thank you. Thank you so much for the time you've given us today. I mean, as a lot of people have just seen and been saying on the chat, like it's been really insightful. We're really appreciative of the time that you've given us. So for the rest of the guys, thank you for joining. We do this every month. So if you're on the meetup group, you'll be getting the invites for the next talk. Yeah.
Glad you found it useful. And bye.
Bye.
Ciao.